click. Then another click. At the far compost corner of the yard, the pruning shears close on one dry stem, and you bend to lift it out of the dirt before it disappears into the rest of the mess. Maybe I just can't leave things alone, you think. Maybe this is just one more small way of inventing work when the day hasn't even fully begun. But that explanation usually lands too shallow. When the day feels shapeless, a small correction can feel strangely urgent. A clipped stem, a cleaner edge, one visible change that says your hands still know how to make something better than it was a minute ago. And for a lot of older adults, that feeling is doing more than easing a yard. So if these quiet routines are not just fussing, not just preference, not just a way to stay busy, then what exactly are they holding together inside you? Because this is not fussiness. It is self-stabilization through visible order. And then something precise starts to take over. On the patio table, one pot sits a little offline, not wrong enough to bother anyone else, but enough for your eye to catch. You turn it slightly, shift it a fraction, then step back just long enough to see if the row settles. That small adjustment does more than change the table. It creates a result your body can register immediately. Before, something was off. Now, it's better. No guessing, no waiting. The change holds. For many people, that kind of feedback matters more than it sounds. When thoughts feel scattered or hard to pin down, a visible correction gives the mind something solid to land on. It turns a vague pressure into a finished action. And once that loop becomes reliable, see it, fix it, feel it settle, the routine stops being random. It becomes one of the ways you keep the day from drifting too far out of shape. And this pattern usually didn't begin in the yard. It was built over years when your attention had somewhere to go and something real to hold. You noticed what needed fixing. You stepped in before things got worse. You didn't always call it anything. You just handled it. Along the side of the house, you loop the hose back onto the reel, guiding it in so it doesn't kink or twist. It's a small thing, but you don't leave it half done. That habit, finishing what's in your hands, comes from a life where loose ends turned into bigger problems if you ignored them. For many older adults, that way of moving through the world doesn't disappear when the pace of life changes. It looks for a place to land. Fewer big responsibilities may sit on your shoulders now, but the instinct to notice, to correct, to maintain still lives in your hands. So the yard becomes a smaller stage for the same role. And that is where a simple routine starts carrying more weight than it first appears. What makes this harder to explain is what it quietly gives back. At the potting bench, a seed tray sits uneven, the surface of the soil slightly raised on one side. You press it down with 2 fingers, smoothing it until the top levels out without needing to measure or think too much about it. That moment isn't about the soil, it's about recognition. You see something off and you know how to bring it back into balance. That kind of awareness doesn't come from theory. It comes from years of paying attention to how things hold together. And there's a quiet strength in that. You don't need a big result to feel steady. A small correction is enough. A surface made even, a row brought back into line. You can feel the shift without needing to explain it. But the same sensitivity has an edge. The more clearly you notice what's off, the harder it becomes to ignore it. And that's where the routine starts doing more than it shows. And then there are the moments when there is nothing left to adjust. The yard is quiet. The rows are straight. The soil is set. You take the gloves off and set them down on the edge of the bench, but you don't go inside right away. It's in that pause that something shifts. Without a task in your hands, the structure drops away faster than you expect. The steadiness you just felt doesn't disappear all at once, but it thins. The edges of the moment get softer, less defined. For many people, this is the part they don't talk about. When there's no clear next step, the mind doesn't always settle into rest. Sometimes it starts to drift. Not dramatically, just enough to feel less anchored than you were a minute ago. And that is the quiet cost of relying on something that works so well. When the action ends, you notice what it was holding in place. And this is where the misreading often turns inward. You sit on the porch step for a moment, the shears set down beside you, and you catch yourself scanning the yard again. There's always one more leaf, one more edge, one more small thing that could be brought back into place. It's easy, in that moment, to give yourself a simple label. Maybe I'm just too particular. Maybe I don't know how to stop. Maybe I've gotten used to needing something to fix. But that explanation doesn't quite hold. What's happening isn't just a habit that got out of hand. It's a response to something harder to sit with. When nothing in front of you needs doing, the space inside can start to feel too open, too undefined. So yes, you go back to the small task. And yes, from one angle, that looks like you can't leave things alone. And from another, it's the way you keep yourself from coming loose when the day offers you nothing solid to hold. And the deeper layer is not just about calm, it's about proof. On the garden path, a few leaves have gathered where the wind pushed them overnight. You bend, gather a small handful, and move them aside. The difference is immediate. The line of the path clears. The space looks usable again. That change may look small, but it carries weight. You did something, and the world answered. In a season of life where fewer things shift because of you, that kind of response matters more than it once did. For many older adults, this is where the meaning turns. The routine is no longer only about keeping the yard in order. It becomes a way of keeping usefulness visible, a way of confirming that your actions still reach outward and create a result. And when that kind of proof becomes rare elsewhere, even a handful of moved leaves can feel more important than it looks. It is worth admitting that if you only feel steady when your hands are busy outside, you may be carrying more strain than you call by name. That does not make these quiet routines trivial, and it does not make you rigid. This is steadying work, a practical way of giving both your nervous system and your self-respect something real to hold. What looks like a small yard habit is often how a capable person keeps from coming apart in the emptier hours of the day. You might have told yourself a simple version of the story, that you just don't know how to rest, that you've gotten used to staying busy, that you've turned small yard work into something bigger than it needs to be. But what you're actually doing is different. You're using visible order to keep something inside from slipping too far out of shape. You're taking a moment that could feel loose and giving it edges your body can trust. You step back at the patio edge and look at the row of pots you just straightened, not to admire them, just to feel whether the day is still in your hands. A quiet yard routine is often how a capable person keeps their inner world from unraveling. And if you had named it that sooner, you might have been a little less hard on yourself for needing it. Click. The shears close again at the compost corner. The sound is the same as it was at the start, but it doesn't mean the same thing anymore. What once felt like a small, unnecessary habit now reads as something far more precise. You cut away a dry stem, brush a bit of soil aside, and pause just long enough to feel the difference. Not in the plant, but in yourself. The edge is clearer. The moment holds. This was never just about keeping the yard in order. It was about keeping a part of you from going undefined when the rest of the day offers less shape than it used to. And that is why something this small can carry so much weight without ever asking to be explained. There is a point in life when usefulness becomes quieter, but no less important. When the roles that once made it obvious begin to thin out, and the question of what still depends on me doesn't always have a clear answer. If you find yourself returning to small, practical actions that create visible change, that is not something to dismiss. It is a signal that you still need to feel your impact, still need to see that what you do reaches something real. And sometimes, that signal shows up in the simplest form. A pair of shears, a single cut, a moment where something shifts and you know you are still here in it.